The sky is the limit when it comes to urban planning in Toronto, and of course I mean that literally. There are so many skyscrapers going up around us, but is there a smarter way for us to build this city while also making it easier or maybe just downright possible to still get around? Naama Blonder is an architect and urban planner with Smart Density, and Alexandra Lambropoulos is getting her master's in urban planning and is the host of the podcast Urban Limitrophe. Thank you both of you for being here with me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so Naama, I want to start with you because we just heard from a lot of those people around town who were talking about the thing that drove them the craziest about planning in the city of Toronto. You probably heard there how many times people referenced housing. And so as the co-founder of Smart Density, I'm curious from you, what's one idea that you have that could actually improve housing in Toronto?
Smart density, and that means, building next to transit, building dense, not necessarily hyper tall, but definitely dense. And that brings us to the 15-minute neighborhood concept.
Right.
Everything is within
pushed by
a
Gil
walking.
Penalosa in this campaign.
He didn't invent it. It's a
Right.
very common professional term to use when we try to explain to communities what it actually means to have a mixed use, that everything is walkable, that you can reach your daily needs. Your daily needs are met within 15 minutes of walking from where you live. So that to me, it sounds like a good summary.
Okay, good start. Alexandra, I want to turn over to you. We've talked a lot about housing affordability. That's certainly something that several of those people talked about. A lot of times when we do so, we think of affordable housing, kind of straight up subsidized housing by the government. But what we're finding from so many people is just renting and buying generally is so tough right now in this city. I'm curious, do you have one idea that might actually make it a bit cheaper for folks to rent and to buy in the city of Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work that I do is looking at the idea of creative mixed use. And that means looking at buildings, and very similar to what Naama was talking about, like smart density, and how do you leverage already the real estate that we have, the buildings that we have, to not just build single uses, but mixing a number of different public amenities, but also affordable housing amongst a number of other public amenities that help to make our cities and housing ultimately more affordable, but also really a lot more livable by creating these public spaces that enable people to build community in a number of different things. So yeah.
There were a lot of times also during this campaign that I heard the term the missing middle, and that is a problem in the city of Toronto. It's a problem in a lot of cities. Naama, I'm curious from you, why is the missing middle such a problem in Toronto, and what's one thing that could be done to help that?
Already being done. So Toronto, you look at it from the air, the last time you landed maybe from an airplane, the vast majority of the city is zone single family. All you could do is to buy a home or a house and build another house. You are not allowed to have more than one family living on that lot. On the other hand, you look right and you see those hyper-density nodes. So the missing middle reflects to the type of housing that could be between the single family and the tall buildings. But the missing middle is also, missing the middle of income, of communities, of demographics. And that is something that Toronto, like many other North American cities, has been challenged with. But there's a discussion. The city has worked really hard in the last 3 years about changing that policy.
Okay, and I just am looking at the clock here. The polls have now closed, so those results will be coming in fast and furious, but I want to keep continuing on with this conversation. And Alexandra, over to you, kind of the same question, because we've been hearing so many things about the missing middle. Penalosa was talking about allowing people to kind of age in place, having people subdivide their homes. We heard another conversation about legalizing rooming houses, adding more duplexes, triplexes. What do you think? What would be a good solution to this missing middle?
I think the interesting part about the missing middle and this concept is really it's really about providing flexibility for allowing people to live a lifestyle that might be more like amenable to the current layout, to the type of life that they're trying to live. And you mentioned already a few options there, like aging in place, but it's also looking at maybe having multi-generational families in one space. Like Toronto is a place where there's a number of newcomers, all coming from around the world, all used to different kind of living styles, and the way that we currently have our housing set up doesn't allow for these different types of community or different ways of living to currently operate. So the missing middle really does provide like a gateway to allow that to happen.
Well, and oftentimes when there is a change in the city, there's objections from residents. I want to point out one just recently, Garden Suites this year, they were allowed to have that second building, that second dwelling just behind the house in the backyard. So nice if you have a backyard, I don't know. That's quite a privilege right now in the city of Toronto. But Naama, I'm curious from you, when you hear about a policy like that, that faced fierce opposition from residents. They tried to object to it, held it up for a while. Ultimately, it's gone forward. But how is that kind of an example of the roadblocks that are being dealt with in this city?
It's really interesting because, you know, when that policy came up, I said, wow, that it's not going to solve the affordability crisis. Like, you're not going to solve it one by one. And then there was the appeal by another, other NIMBYs as groups across the city. And I thought, that was the most harmless policy on earth. That's why I actually criticized it, because it was so easy. And then you see those groups objecting it, and I'm saying, if we're objecting, if we are even having those discussions at this point, what's going to happen when we really need to, solve the affordability crisis with something that actually moves the needle?
Okay. Resident objections are one thing. I'll take that point for sure. We hear about it a lot. The other thing that we do hear about is red tape and bureaucracy at City Hall. So on that side of the equation, Alexandra, when you're looking at the ways that things function at City Hall, is there a way to kind of clean up that red tape that you can think of?
I think one way of doing that is from my different interviews that I've done on the podcast, talking with community groups, I kind of ask a similar question to them. My panelists my guests trying to ask them if you're in front of city council, or if you're in front of, or what kind of policies or programs would you need in order to escalate your work and elevate it and have more of an impact across your city. And so I think that's really it. A city council really has to listen to what these different community organizations or community groups are doing. I found that a lot of the solutions that we have are already rooted, already found by these different community groups addressing these issues. So I think that's a good start.
Okay. Naama, I'm curious, one of the things that drives me the craziest is the gridlock and the congestion that we have to deal with in this city, no matter if you're on a streetcar or in a car. A lot of people are probably going to relate to the fact that they're getting stuck. And many cases, I'm thinking about Adelaide right now, shut down for months. You don't have to look that far to Eglinton to see what they've had to deal with. And then St. Clair before that. All of those projects were big transit projects, which a lot of people generally around town seem to be on board with. But what I guess I'm curious about is how could the city be doing city building and getting that growth that we need while also allowing the city to be livable at the same time?
You just said that car or streetcar doesn't matter. So it does matter. It matters a lot. And the sustainable future we all want to walk towards is really deprioritizing the car and putting pedestrian first. Transit, this is the type of urban planning that it's very clear to professionals. And now the question is how we get everyone on board. But, the discussion around car, you mentioned real estate for parking. It's a really important discussion to have because we need to put the car and the use of car in place. So investing in transit, everyone here should be super happy that it's happening. We're talking about the relief line, now the Ontario line, for 40 years. It's finally, has its budget, construction started. These are exciting times, so everyone should be. I know it's annoying in 8 a.m., but we live in exciting times.
All right, sounds good. We just have 1 minute left, so I want to hear from both of you. Let's end on a positive note. Is there one thing that Toronto is nailing that the Six should be on a platform that other people are looking at in terms of trying to replicate that? Alexandra, we'll start with you.
I'll start. I think definitely public art. I used to work in a public arts organization, and there's community groups out there doing some amazing things, trying to add bits of vibrancy across the city in unexpected ways. And so, yeah, I'd say public art.
Love it. Naama, how about
My
for you?
first answer would be food. We're doing food really well. But our open space, public realm, playgrounds, I have 2 young kids. We are nailing it.
Okay, great. Well, hey, a little optimism, a bit upbeat. Nice to end there. Thank you so much, Naama and Alexandra, for joining us tonight.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.